everybody. Thank you guys all for joining us today. If you could please do me a favor and mute your cell phones to not interrupt. And then I would like to introduce Ken Weintraub, presenting today on the City of Champions. Let's hear it for Ken.
Hey. Hello, everyone. Oh, it is good to be back at Evertrue. Some say I would want to be at Busch Stadium or Enterprise Center or the new soccer field or wherever venues are. It could be at the Chase, reimagining wrestling, or Saratoga Lanes, where some of the greatest bowlers in American history, applied their trade. We are going to be talking about the great Budweisers. And if anybody can tell me who the five Budweisers were, the greatest bowling team in American history from St. Louis, you will win $10,000. Alrighty? Oh, and you think I'm kidding? Emma, I got the money right in that bag. All right, we'll get it in a couple minutes. But, and I mentioned wrestling, but basketball. We were champions within a 11-year period in college. Who were those college hoops champions? St. Louis U. Who was their superstar? Easy Ed Macaulay, who 11 years later was the backup center to Bill Russell, Bob Pettit, with the St. Louis Hawks, our only NBA world champion. And the list went on. But with your kind permission, we are going to talk about the national pastime, the good and a little bit of the bad, why we could have maybe had more championships, and the loss of one player. I'm going to begin there. We all know the Cardinals had an extraordinary run in the 1940s, but then fell way down the standings in the 1950s and in the early 60s. It took until 64, 18 years after our last World Championship, to be in the World Series again. Why? I think for two factors. One is a simple one. They could have had, for $500 more than the New York Yankees paid, one of the greatest clutch ball players in history. I am speaking of, from St. Ambrose High School, Lawrence Peter Berra, who was barely taller than I am. He was about 50 pounds heavier. He looked like a fire hydrant. But he had more natural talent than almost any baseball player alive. And the Browns wanted him, the Cardinals wanted him, but were not willing to pay him more than $5,000 as a signing bonus. But the New York Yankees had a brilliant scouting system, and they saw potential in Berra that the Cardinals and the Browns didn't quite scratch the surface hard enough. They offered Berra $500 more. Wow. And he signed at the beginning of World War II. He was 18 years old with the New York Yankees. We'll get more into Yogi Berra and the great Cardinals-Yankees World Series that someday will hopefully happen again. But right now, we are going to talk about the City of Champions, St. Louis, Missouri. Emma, the 1946, and suddenly, not suddenly, but after 4 years of the U.S. being in a brutal conflict, the greatest terrible war of human history, August 15th, 1945, and you were all little babies, or maybe even not around, or maybe dating a GI, or your Uncle Harry, or Uncle Herman, or even Aunt Will was in the Waves or the Wax, but 16 million of Americans were in the service in the Pacific, Europe, Alaska, which was not a state yet, Hawaii, which was not a state, or the US. Well, and baseball had been decimated by continuing but playing with young kids, young as 15 years of age. Who was the youngest Major League Baseball player of all time? You saw him in Sportsman's Park for many years later. Pitcher for the Cincinnati Reds. Who? Joe? You know who I mean. All right, now you got to pay me $5,000. Who? Joe Nuxhall. All righty. Who later became a very fine pitcher. Well, he stayed with the Reds. 15 in 1944. When the war ended, he was still too young for the draft. Stuck with them and became a legendary broadcaster right up until the 1980s. Joe Nuxhall. But in any case, war is over, and the big boys of Major League stardom were coming back, including number 6 for the Boston Red Sox, the splendid splinter, Theodore Samuel Williams, and the Dorona Greyhound from Donora, Pennsylvania, also wearing number 6, Stanley Frank Usual. And there is a wonderful book, and I'll hang around for a few minutes if anybody wants to browse it, called The Victory Season, the end of World War II and the birth of baseball's golden age. And the Cardinals should have been in the heart of that for decades, but they weren't. And we'll get into that in a minute. But it's 1946, and we are going to see the Cardinals are reunited. The boys that were in the service, including Stanley Musial, who missed the entire 45 season, were back. And let's see, Emma, a short clip of the last game of the 46 World Series.
This brought up a Red Sox pinch hitter, Tom McBride, batting for pitcher Johnson.
Top of the ninth.
McKean eyes the batter carefully.
Harry the Cat.
There goes a screwball pitch. McBride rounds to Shanebeat, and Higgins is forced out at second to end the ball game, with the St. Louis Cardinals winning the 7th and final game of the 1946 World Series by a score of 4-3. It was the 6th time in their 9 World Series appearances since 1926 that baseball's highest honor has gone to the St. Louis Cardinals. The Cards also distinguished themselves by winning for the 4th time in a series that went the limit.
Now, we don't see a black face in that clubhouse, nor was there one in the Red Sox, the losing team. However, in Montreal, the Dodgers' top farm club in the International League, who was having an MVP season, the first black since 1884 to be signed in the major leagues. For $6,000, who was it?
How about Jackie Robinson?
I think you are absolutely correct. Jack Roosevelt Robinson, who ironically could have been a Red Sox. He was actually, he had a tryout with the Red Sox before Branch Rickey signed him with the Dodgers. But the Red Sox ownership, they were Southern in birth, Tom the Yawkey family, and in thought and culture, and they were not going to have Negroes, as they were referred to in Boston at that time. Now, here was the thing. you had two great rivals in the National League in the 1940s. Brooklyn, and Brooklyn wins a pennant in 41. St. Louis wins then the war, 42, 43, 44. Somehow the Cubs snuck in 45 with wartime rosters, and then Brooklyn and St. Louis play to a playoff, best of 3 games, and the Cardinals won that playoff, and against the Brooklyn Dodgers. Now, the Cardinals had young talent all over, in many places, but there were weak spots. But Musial was only 25 years old. Shandix, 24 years old. Harry the Cat Burkeen in his late 20s. The Cooper brothers, similar of age. War veterans, hardened, but talented as heck. But Brooklyn not only had success with Jackie Robinson in 47, but they began hiring and bringing up other great black ball players before anyone else. Roy Campanella is an example. Junior Gilliam and Don Newcomb, great pitching. The Cardinals could have had their pick. They had an incredible scouting group, but it was perceived that St. Louis, as the most southernmost city in Major League Baseball, would not support a team with black ball players. It was a tragedy. And St. Louis, tied with Brooklyn for years, suddenly slid down to mediocrity. But thank God, August Busch took the team in his ownership in 1953 with the brewery, and he said, I want to win. I want to win. I don't care what color the players are. I want to win. I'm not here to lose. He had paid $3 million from then owner Fred Sy, who was going to jail on income tax charges. But Sy had maybe the last laugh. What he did, he took his payment from Bush, not in cash, but in Anheuser-Busch stock in 1953. Now, everybody here is, and Emma and Jen, you know, they're your clients. Everybody here is a financial genius, okay? If you guys were around in 1929, we would have had no depression. However, just figure what Fred Sy's stock of $3 million became at the time of his death around 2000. Let's just say he had a chunk of change. But in any case, the Cardinals then integrated in 54, one of the last National League teams to do it. But boy, then by 64, we had a team. It was called the $1 Million Bench. You had Kurt Flood, Pop Gibson, Julian Javier, Orlando Cepeda, and Kurt Flood, either African American or Latin American. But the color of their skin was not white. But boy, were they winners. One of the greatest baseball teams in National League history. That was the legacy of the Cardinals from top to bottom, back to the top in a 20-year period. Oh, my beloved Brownies. From 1903 to 1953, we had 2 major league teams. And what was the expression, Hank Lewin? We were first in booze, first in shoes, and last in the American League. That's right, the Brownies. And I'll give you a little bit of history. Why? Sure. I'm going to put this on for a minute, all right? And I'll roast. And This may cost you another $1,000 above my normal compensation. All right. So here was the deal. The Browns had very wealthy ownership, but they had what was called an edifice, not edifice, but edifice complex. They owned the ballpark at Grand Adonia. And during the teens and 20s and 30s, they spent all their excess monies, profits, on expanding Sportsman's Park. Well, the Cardinals were tenants at a very reasonable rent. And what the Cardinals did, under the leadership of Wesley Branch Rickey, was to create baseball's first farm system. What is a farm system? Minor league, a chain of minor league teams. The Cardinals at one point in the early 40s had 24 teams in AAA, AA, single A, A, B, C, and D. Every little town, everybody right up to the bigger cities without MLB ball, like Milwaukee, my hometown of Buffalo, Toronto, Montreal, so many of the West Coast, San Fran, LA, all had minor league teams. But the Cardinals they built from the farms to the cities an incredible wellspring of talent. And the Browns languished and languished. And their attendance was always below their tenants in Sportsman's Park. If the Cardinals drew 1 million in a given season, even at the end of the Depression, the Browns may have drawn 200,000. But World War II came. And somehow the Brownies were able to patch together a team of kids and over-the-hill veterans or players that were declared 4F with old baseball injuries that they were unfit to serve in military service. And in a talent-depleted 1944, your Brownies beat the depleted Yankees in the last game of the season to win their first and only American League pennant.
I was there. Yeah.
You were there. What is your name again, sir?
My name's Warren Wimmer. But
Warren Wimmer.
Chet Labs is the guy that won the game.
Yes, yes. In September 30th, 1944, what did Chet Labs do?
He hit a home run about 6 feet away from me.
Right. Oh, my God.
Left field bleachers. Bleachers.
Really?
Yep.
Now, what were you doing there? Were you a kid or were you working there?
I was a kid. I was born in 31, so I was 13 years old.
13 years old. Wow. That is a story that inspires me. All right, thank you. Why didn't you take me? I mean, I was born in 1950, but we could have rushed things along. All right? So anyway, the Brownies, Cardinals were in the World Series. This town went nuts.
Rounds and cards tangle in the series opener with Will Harridge, an interested bystander, and pitchers Cooper and Galehouse exchanging greetings. Major Billy Southworth Jr. and family, as well as Governor Brinker and manager Southworth and Sue. 33,000 fans packed Sportsman's Park to see the Cinderella Browns try for baseball's greatest triumph. And this is Gene Moore up in the fourth. Cooper grooves one, and it's a clean single, and he rounds first. It's the beginning of the end of a perfectly good ball game right in this fourth inning. Quinn up for his big moment. Cooper throws, and yep, he bombs it right out of that ballpark. A 2-run homer that did it up Brown. A 1-run rally in the ninth wasn't enough for the Cards, and there it stood, 2-1 when the shades of evening fell. It took the Browns quite a while to make the series, but look at them now. Anybody say anything about 2-1 odds? Anyway, St. Louis won.
Browns won that day, and they won one other game, but the Cards prevailed because Mutual was in its last year of play before going into the Navy, and the Browns then slid as the war was ending in 45 to third place, and then they were gone after the 53 season. Now they went to one of the following cities: Montreal, Buffalo, or Baltimore? Baltimore. And to this day, if you look at the colors of the Baltimore Orioles uniform, they are exactly the same color of this wonderful jacket and team. The black, the brown, and orange. The orange and brown are the Orioles colors to this day, and they were brought by a brewery, of all places, National Bohemian. Gerald Hoffmeister bought the Browns, brought them to Baltimore, and St. Louis would remain one major league team town. Let's move to basketball. Bum, 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 bum. Sweet Georgia Brown, Saturday night at the Kiel Center, we were around to go see the
Our choir's Thursday afternoon.
this Thursday?
Yeah.
And you guess where I'm gonna be? On an airplane to see, Emma knows, to be my beautiful grandchildren, who, thank God, are taking after my lovely wife, and not me. No, we're gonna be literally arriving in Eugene, Oregon at 1 o'clock, or else I will be there. But I'm gonna be with the Veterans Choir here on November 11th at 9:15, whenever they begin, for Veterans Day celebration. Count it, count me in, all right? And my father may come back from World War II and lead a poker game, as he did in Paris in August of 44, all right? But in any case, we have the greatest Catholic, maybe one of the greatest universities in the world, St. Louis University. Wonderful Jesuit institution. I actually got some familiarity with St. Louis U back in the 1990s when they became a partner in sponsoring St. Louis Senior Olympics. Wonderful partners. And non-denominational, no worry about sectarian differences, changes. It was in the spirit of community and fellowship, health and welfare. So I am a huge fan. It was Father Reiner, who was the president of SLU, who brought in Jewish people on the board of St. Louis University, the Seawalks. There we go, Nancy Seawalk, Suzanne's friend, was the first Jew ever to be on the board of St. Louis U. That's what Father Reiner started. And so I, knowing all of that, am a huge fan of Billiken basketball. It's after the war. And the Billikens are in the tough Missouri Valley Conference with schools like Bradley, Southern Illinois, Evansville, among others. But under the leadership from, I believe, McBride High School, Ed McCauley, who was 6'9" and became the dominant pivot man or center in college basketball. And in 1948, they made it to the finals of the National Invitational Tournament, which was the prominent tournament championship of that era. Let's take a look at a game at Kiel Auditorium. Some of you were there with your hot dates. Minnesota. Macaulay's number 50. There he is again. They could shoot, they could rebound, and pass. Now it's 48. Coach Eddie Hickey, to the left, has a stellar group, virtually all from St. Louis. It's a bit hazy because everybody was smoking. Remember? Oh, God. Lucky Strikes and those White Owl Panatella cigars, which to this day, because I'm old enough to have gone to arenas when smoking was not only allowed, but encouraged. The smell of cigar smoke is one of the great aromas of my life. I can tell a White Owl, and if some of you boys have any right now, go through it, okay? You can light up and I'll join you outside, maybe even inside. But in any case, all right, that was St. Louis U basketball. Now, Coach Eddie Hickey, they won in New York City a national championship. To this day, the only collegiate national title any St. Louis team has ever won in basketball. It could happen again, but the 1948 champions. All right, let's move to one of the great upsets in world sports history, soccer. A sport that St. Louis has gravitated with, particularly with the great immigrant communities of Germans, Irish, Italians, who particularly focused on the south side, South St. Louis, and the U.S. soccer team for the 1950 Olympics, which was going to be in Brazil. The leadership out of New York City knew where the greatest soccer talent was. It wasn't in New York. It wasn't in LA. It was where? St. Louis, the South Side especially. We're going to see one of their leaders, Harry Keogh, who later became one of the founders of St. Louis Senior Olympics. And I had the pleasure of meeting Harry Keogh. This is Brazil.
Brazil, 1950. The England squad were arriving at their first FIFA World Cup. After missing the previous 3 tournaments, the perceived kings of football were coming to prove they were the world's best and to take home the Jules Rimet Trophy. The defending champions from 12 years previously, Italy, handed the World Cup over to the hosts. Surely it will be only a matter of time before it will be in the possession of England's captain, Billy Wright. After beating Chile, England faced the USA. The Americans had given the Spanish a scare when going down 3-1, but England will be significantly stronger, wouldn't they?
Harry Keogh.
Harry Keogh was a member of the US team.
We still were feeling pretty good about ourselves because we had really scared the hell out of Spain. You know, and then we had another 2.5 days in between to play, and so we certainly didn't entertain any ideas we were going to beat them, you know, but we figured we could give them a battle for it.
Keogh and the rest of the US team were amateurs. They'd been given odds of 500 to 1 to win the tournament, and to many that seemed generous. England had a team of talents known around the world. The famous wingers Stanley Matthews and Tom Finney were part of the squad. But that day, in Belo Horizonte, Matthews was omitted from the starting lineup. There weren't substitutes in those days, so he wasn't going to be able to take part.
According to everybody who ever wrote about Stanley Matthews, he was probably one of the greatest talents that there ever was. Now, had he played, chances are they would have won, you know. But the chances are it would have won anyway.
England had no reason to worry. They'd won 23 of 30 matches since the war. That included home and away wins against the powerful Italians. They controlled the early exchanges and had 6 shots on goal in the opening 12 minutes.
As the game went on, of course, they dominated the game completely. If I had to talk percentage-wise, you know, in the whole game, they dominated the game maybe 85–90%, you know, to 15 or 10%, you know, because they were certainly better soccer players than we were.
But as half-time approached, there was a rare American attack. Walter Barr tried a shot from outside the English area.
Right away, Joe Mason's dived through his head. He doesn't hit the ball in the corner. The ball just hits him like that, and it probably goes, you know, you can't follow that with your eyes that fast, but it probably slipped on his head and then changed a little direction and a little speed, and the goalie was on the ground, and the ball was behind him in the goal, and nobody knew where the hell the ball went until they saw it bouncing up and down with the net. That was at the 32nd minute of the first half. So, you know, we were just going to hold on we got to hold on till the half. You know, because the English got a little mad about that and started to push a little bit. So we got to the half and held it. But nobody on our team dreamed at the halftime that we were going to still be, we're going to win the game with that 1-0.
Surely there was no way they could preserve that lead. They defended in depth, and one player in particular started to play out of his skin. Every keeper has a special match in them. America's goalie that day was Frank Borghi.
He did make a few diving saves here and there, but to me his outstanding feature was when the guy was up in the air coming in the forward and just about ready to head it, Borghi was picking it almost off of his head before he headed it. You know.
As England pressed for the equaliser, a controversial tackle by Charlie Gloves Colombo also proved crucial. Stan Mortensen was through on goal with only Borghi to beat.
The guy was running straight ahead and away from him, and Colombo looked like he was too far behind him, and he just dove headlong and just hit him straight in the back of the knees and grabbed him like that. And, you know, then they both went, you know, they must have went 15 feet, you know, till the momentum carried him. But like Colombo said, you know, and of course that's the way Colombo was, you know. He was getting away from me, I had to stop him some way.
England could do no more. The match ended 1-0, and the shock result travelled around the world to be met with disbelief. When it was announced on BBC Radio, most listeners thought it was an error.
The goal that shook the world. Those young St. Louis kids, some of them war veterans, when they were still in their teens, had come back, began building their lives in South St. Louis and in the city, but developed their skills, were chosen by the U.S. Soccer Federation to represent the United States of America in the Olympics and upset what to this day, literally 75 years later, is regarded as the greatest upset in soccer international history. And your St. Louis boys were the owners of that esteemed achievement. Emma, let's move it along. We're going to stay with basketball. Now, we are going back to the smoke-filled Kiel Auditorium. We had reacquired NBA basketball in 1954 when the Milwaukee Hawks, owned by Ben Kerner, moved the team to Kiel Auditorium in St. Louis. And Kerner had the wisdom to draft a year earlier a great 6'9" star in the Southeast Conference named Robert Bob Pettit, who became one of the top 25 players of all time in pro basketball. But let's go to that fateful evening, April evening, in smoke-filled Kiel Auditorium, Would somebody get me a White Owl cigar ready before I faint? All right. Emma, let's go see sports.
It's Bob Pettit Day in St. Louis. Actually, it's the hometown Hawks versus the Boston Celtics in the
Pettit is number 9.
the NBA championships. But it's Bob Pettit all over the place, running wild as the Hawks ahead 3 games to 2, battle to win this one and so on. Their first pro title in 13 years. There's Pettit again. Pettit plays his greatest game, scoring 21 points in the first half, sparking the Hawks to a 57-52 lead. Celts are always dangerous. They narrow the gap to 1 point in the closing seconds. And the Hawks play to save that slim margin. A cautious game of keep away until the final bell. There's a lot at stake. Time runs out, and the championship goes to the Hawks, 110 to 109. Who's the man of the hour? Bob Pettit. A new scoring record for a regulation time playoff game, 50 points.
Now, here is a fascinating reality about why Bill Russell, who won 10 out of 11 NBA championships in his first 11 years as a player, and then more as a coach, didn't end up with the Hawks, even though the Hawks had the first draft pick. Sadly, racism. He was African American. Born in Louisiana, raised in Oakland, California, won 2 NCAA championships with the University of San Francisco, 6'9½". Bill Russell was by far the greatest player of the 1955-56 collegiate season. But Arnold Red Auerbach was the general manager and coach of the Boston Celtics. Interestingly, he had drafted 8 years earlier, Ed Macaulay from SLU. And Macaulay was a fine pro center. He played on winning teams with Boston, but they didn't win a championship when Macaulay was their center. Auerbach knew from friends who had scouted Russell that Russell would be the missing link with Bob Cousy, Frank Ramsey, Tommy Heinsohn for the Celtics to become a dominant team and finally win a championship. Here is what happened. The old Rochester Royals actually held the rights to that first pick, but Auerbach manipulated a trade between the Hawks and Rochester, only 70 miles from where I grew up. The Royals, who are now the Sacramento Kings, 70 years later. And what did, here is what the Rochester Royals owner did before maneuvering the trade to St. Louis. He said, Auerbach, your owner, the Celtics, Walter Brown, owns the Ice Capades. He did. Now, in those days, the NBA drew peanuts compared to what it is now. It was virtually a glorified minor league compared to baseball, hockey, and pro football. Now, it is amongst the richest enterprises in the world. The National Basketball Association, opening games in about 10 days. And it'll be on every network you can imagine. Hundreds and hundreds of NBA games. But then, you couldn't even get an NBA game on national TV. Now it is and will be everywhere. Bottom line is, Rochester traded the rights to Russell to Boston for an Ice Capades doubleheader in the Rochester War Memorial, because an Ice Capades night would draw more than 4 evenings of pro basketball in most cities. And so that is the backstory of how Bill Russell, who was welcomed in Boston, not always, but there was no racial segregation, and at that time, St. Louis was just emerging out of the Jim Crow past, and the owner, Ben Kerner, feared that whites would not in abundance buy season tickets in enough numbers to support the team with a black superstar. That changed, obviously, in years later. But Bill Russell ended up in Boston. Rochester ended up moving to Cincinnati a year later, and St. Louis moved to Atlanta, the Hawks, in 1970. So, a backstory, you know it first, all right? We were the bowling capital of the world. Now, some of these guys, who was the man with the ball? Who?
Carter?
Don Carter, with that amazing wind-up where the inverted elbow at literally a 45-degree angle topped them all. There was Dick Weber standing beside him. Sitting to the right, Ray Bluth, Tom Hennessy, Billy Waywood, the first guy to the left, the Budweisers. Let's take a look at this immortal group of kegglers. The Budweisers. Anheuser-Busch. Forest Lanes. Don Carter. And his wife was a national champion. A blonde, what was her name? Laverne. Who said Laverne? Okay. Enough of these presentations. We got to go to a local bowling alley. We're going to buy it out, make it ourselves, and we're going to have beer galore, cigarettes, and cigars. All right? We're going to make it like it's 1958. Now, we're going to zip along. We had an incredible, unexpected, finally a Stanley Cup champion to our St. Louis Blues.
Welcome to the Stanley Cup Final presented by Geico. And tonight, it's Game 7, the St. Louis Blues and the Boston Bruins.
The Capitals wear the C on their jersey. Alex Pietrangelo is 29, born like most of the Blues in Canada. The 11th season, plays more than any skater remaining in these playoffs, about 26 minutes a game. Chara, 42, 6'9", tallest in history.
Bennington again.
And the University Pride dropped it across, trying to get it on for through. Up the cross. Turn back over again. Crazy. Cross from behind Coleman. Pulled off on the drop. Snell in the kneeling block. And a shot on Hall. Comes back to side and Borrego in now. They're looking to throw it to the side of the net. Comes on the line. Petrangelo. Petrangelo Hurley. Back to Oldie. Shoots it.
Score!
Meister. It was deflected in front by O'Reilly, and it becomes 1-0. The Blues with the lead.
Sammy playing with a big hit along the boards. Right there. Separation, gets the puck, and goes to work. Simple play hockey, but from not having a shot in forever. They work the puck D to B. Petrangelo to Bolmeister, and then the redirect from Ryan O'Reilly right between the legs of Tuukka.
Our Blues, of course, went on to win that game on 4 on ice at TD Garden in Boston. Of course, owned by a Buffalo guy, Jeremy Jacobs, who owns the biggest concessionaire in sports arenas, airports, and convention centers in the world. It's called Sports Service. All right? Believe me, I have a double bypass to prove how many thousands of Sports Service hot dogs I've eaten in every city I've lived in, including Sports Service's home base, and I'm healthy and wealthy, all right, to this day. Why? Because I've eaten Sports Service foods. Now, we're going to wrap up. It is getting late, and with some songs that are emblematic with St. Louis and its great sporting teams. Right now, the national anthem of baseball. Now, if you don't know the lyrics to this, get out of here.
Take me out to the ball,
Everybody.
game. Take me out with the crowd. Buy me some peanuts and cracker jacks. I don't care if I never get back. Let me root for the home team. If they don't win, it's a shame. For it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game. Take me out to the ball game. Take me out with the crowd. Buy me some peanuts and cracker jacks. I don't care if I never get back. Let me root for the card team. If they don't win, it's a shame. For it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game. For it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game.
All right, Emma, we are going to wrap up with a song that is the theme for one of the most beloved sports teams in the world. For 90 years, the Harlem Globetrotters, who for decades never played a game in Harlem, they were based out of Chicago by a promoter named Abe Saperstein, who literally created a team. In those days, pro basketball was segregated. He had the best African-American talent in the 1930s, carried them until even the days of integration. And I know because the Globetrotters were so popular that they would play an opening game in NBA arenas before a Hawks game, before a Knicks game. That often drew more people than the NBA team. So, but there was a song so identified with the Globies, the Globetrotters, that I sing it in the shower every morning, much to the chagrin of my put-upon wife, all right, of 44 years. I hope I make it to 45. All righty, let's go, Emma, rock and roll it.
No galleon has got a shade on.
Everybody.
Sweet Georgia Brown. 2 left feet, but oh so neat has sweet Georgia Brown. They all sigh and want to die for sweet Georgia Brown. I'll tell you why. You know I don't lie. It's been said she knocks them dead when she lands in town. Since she came, why it's a shame how she's cooled them down. Fellas that she can get must be fellas she ain't met. Georgia claimed her, Georgia named her sweet Georgia Brown. All those tips the porter slips to sweet Georgia Brown. They buy clothes at fashion shows for $1 down. Fellas now, tip your hats. Oh boy, ain't she's a cat. Who's that mister? Ain't your sister? It's sweet Georgia Brown.
There you go. The Harlem Globetrotters will be in town the first Wednesday in January. They make Enterprise Center in St. Louis for one brief night the entertainment basketball capital of the world. Ladies and gentlemen, it is almost 4 o'clock, and I have literally taken way too much time. But remember, you may not have been born here like I wasn't. I've been here 41 years. But, and there's Jen Craig, all right, who you can blame for bringing me here about 3 years ago for the first time. All right, but Jen, I have to praise these fine people.
I agree.
For being not only great citizens, but friends, but the finest sports fans who have made St. Louis, Missouri, the city of champions. Thank you. I'll be back in November, at least certainly on Veterans Day with Hank Miller and the Ever-True Veterans Group, and have a great evening. Root for my Buffalo Bills at 6:15 tonight on your local, what is it tonight? Monday Night Football. It sounds like it'll be on ESPN. All right, if you don't have the cable, Emma will lend you the money to buy it. All right, all right. So we'll see everybody next month. Bye now. If anybody wants for the next 10 minutes or so to glance at these books, you're welcome to, or to try out the Browns jacket. Okay.